Jacksonville. The child was born who couldn't sit still. 86 years later with no regret. You know that man can't sit still yet. The Great Depression couldn't get him down. He worked for his dad's store in town, collecting money in small amounts. Poor whites and blacks in their furniture accounts. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. As he'd collect, he'd talk to folks. He'd hear legends, tales, songs, and jokes. Now this fine treasure he'd record and write. He was colorblind, didn't see black and white. Writer's project for the WPA. Zora Neale Hurston, he earned his pay. Crackers and blacks, they talk for hours. It was a barefoot history, this land of flowers.
The Weekman was on the 13th of October 2018, beaming to you from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. We'll spend a lot of time in this program talking about voting and conditions for voting. And we start to segue with Uncle Karl Rove and his article he was writing in the Wall Street Journal. Let's just get to it. Next month, the people vote on a Kavanaugh. It's very clear the Republican Party is using Kavanaugh as a segue to getting their people out to vote. There is no doubt about that. But it's a disguised effort. There are different factions within the Republican Party. There are those that expect Kavanaugh to go to the conservative bent on social issues, so-called social issues. What we're talking about there, and women's rights is not really a social issue, but more in terms of things like same-sex marriage, etc., transgender people, bathrooms, the sort of dirty little linen type operations the Republicans have been running. And that appeals to the evangelical type characters who are not a religion but a political formation. And then we have another set of Republican types, the major set, the business interest. Kavanaugh is a business-friendly judge, no doubt about it. And he's not a friend of working people, period. And that is to be understood. And exactly where that intersect. Now, using this as a national issue to get the base out is malpractice, nothing but pure propaganda, period. It sends a message, a very negative message to the American people. Because what you're talking about is someone here that is accused of sexual assault, lewd behavior, and various other acts against women. And you put this person on the highest court, and you eliminate what many would say any type of petty moralizing or moral factor. And we at this mic are not interested in the morality of Kavanaugh and any of these other people because it is a false premise. It is like fool's gold. Let's go to Uncle Carl here. He's writing on the 11th of October in the Wall Street Journal. A very good place for him to be because it's a business agenda. Many Republicans celebrated Kavanaugh swearing in Monday as the end of a bitter confrontation battle, but the game isn't over for Republican candidates. Success in midterm elections may depend on the narrative that emerges from the Kavanaugh showdown. Consider two recent polls released before the Senate voted Saturday to confirm Kavanaugh. After the riveting Judiciary Committee hearing on the 27th NPR PBS NewsHour, the Marxist poll asked, "Is there still any doubt whether the charges are true? Do you think Kavanaugh should be confirmed?" Respondents said no by 52% to 40%. A right-wing Harris poll, incidentally Harris, and I don't know why Harvard lends its name to this ridiculousness, is owned by Pinhead Penn, the propagandist for Hillary to Monster Clinton, and he was around as a pollster, later went to Microsoft. Now he's running his own right-wing scheme. Asked if the FBI's review of these allegations finds no corroboration of the accusation of sexual assault, should Kavanaugh be confirmed. 60% said yes, 40% said no, with 86% of the Republicans, 58% of the independents, and 40% of the Democrats. The 20-point swing between the two surveys show public opinion is malleable. 1/5 of Americans are up in the air. Where they land on Election Day could depend on where they feel doubts remain about Kavanaugh's allegations are convinced there are no collaboration there. Now, a point about the FBI investigation. The FBI was not mandated to collaborate anything. They were just making a simple investigation. Now, we, the American people, have not seen the report. It was in a Star Chamber. Senate people could go in and read it. I think it was about 16 pages. But they could not take the report out, and some staff members. So this was done in a top secret situation. It could have been just 16 blank pages. There were no comments by senators as to the authenticity, the factual nature of the investigation. In fact, some of the people were not investigated at all. It was a sham investigation. Now that is the issue there. That's why Democrats are attacking the Bureau's report as a complete cover-up. No doubt about that. Senator Merkley, not a search for the truth. Senator Harris of California whitewashed Senator Blumenthal of Connecticut. I expect this to continue. Since Republican candidates can win the argument, the confirmation was ugly, raw, divisive, and hurtful for America. Well, that was by design. This particular judge himself is divisive and hurtful for America. Senator Feinstein is responsible for the mess by holding a forged letter for 6 weeks rather than immediately turning it over to the FBI to investigate. Privately, the Senate destroyed Ms. Ford's anonymity, damaged Kavanaugh's reputation, created a national circus. Well, nothing to counter the buffoonery that occurred at the White House when the entertainer, Mr. West, appeared there. A man obviously has mental health issues, and the football legend Jim Brown. And it's interesting that Brown would be a moron and sacrifice the good work he's done in the past on behalf of African American athletes and African Americans in general. But however, In recent years, he's crossed over to the Republican Party. Why is he doing that? That is in the air. More than likely for financial reward. But his name is going into the sunset. At one time, Brown was upset by the celebrity of the All-American hero O.J. Simpson. Now, you would not address Jim Brown as an All-American hero, and there are a number of reasons for that. But at the same time, by Brown lending his name to this buffoonery that occurred at the White House, lessens his quote-unquote social and political value. Now, some would say, we heard somebody on Facebook say, won't mention names, you can go look at it, that the rapper West, or entertainer, could present ideas. They were there, incidentally, to talk about sentencing disparity relative to African Americans and the murder campaign in Chicago of African Americans in certain areas of the city of Chicago. Now, let's make it very clear. Most areas of Chicago are not in a gangland war. The reason that the areas there where you have the murder totals are very high are a resource problem, literally. And you have various factions there that are encouraged by buffoonery. And buffoons such as this West character and others, and the law enforcement agencies in Chicago, to have these inner rivalries and confrontations. Now, the Chicago Police Department, the Justice Department, they know the square miles that are involved in this, the majority of the crimes. They could address it. But what they have decided to do is unleash a war on the community itself. The community itself is not the ones that are killing people in Chicago. This is a smaller segment of the population. And the U.S. government has various tools to deal with that. They, in fact, have military forces that are trained in urban warfare. They have things like stingray and various other surveillance techniques. They can determine the people that are causing the problem, period. And they can put them away surgically. That is all that needs to be done, period. Now, there's been various other things, stop and frisk. Stop and frisk is only good in the areas that you're stopping and frisking, but you're only profiling African Americans, primarily males. That is not a solution. That's a violation of the Constitution. So that is the Chicago story right there. We sort of deviate here. Still, the Republican candidates can win the argument. Sorry about that. Second, the background check for Kavanaugh's career was legitimate and thorough. How does he know that? No one has seen the document. Has Uncle Carl seen the document? Agents interviewed 3 people. Ms. Ford said, Dr. Ford, he's trying to diminish the value of Dr. Ford by calling her Ms. Ford. He won't get away with it here. Were present at the party where she purportedly was assaulted, along with 2 other friends of Kavanaugh at the time who might have knowledge of the incident. They could not collaborate with Ms. Ford's accusation. They also interviewed 2 Yale classmates, Deborah Ramirez, and alleged were eyewitness to lewd conduct. Again, it found no conclusion or collaboration. How does he know that? Because the report has never been made public. Democrats said the FBI should have been interviewed. Dr. Ford and Kavanaugh, but both had already testified for hours on the oath before the Judiciary Committee. But they were not interrogated by people that do interrogations. Lawyers for Dr. Ford and Ramez, backed by Democrats, also demanded interview scores above individuals. This was transparently a delaying tactic. No one on their list could possibly collaborate any of the claims. None had stepped forward to do so. GOP candidates can rightly say this mess shows Congress is broken and pledge to change it. How can they pledge to change anything? Because the Republican Party controls Congress in both the House and in the Senate. By working across party lines to tackle America's real issues, they can then pivot to their stump speeches pointing to a strong economy. Well, the economy, the stock market lost over 1,300 points this week. Rebuilding the military. The military is already built, hauling endless regulations. And this is where the reason he's writing in the Wall Street Journal. Let's go to the buffoonery that was at the White House and what Trump has done since then. He was in Lebanon, Ohio. He praised the Confederate general, a murderer, and a terrorist named Robert E. Lee, asking African Americans to honor us by voting for him as a rally in Ohio. Featured unexpected and provocative dialogue on the Civil War history. 4,000 people were there. He appeared buoyant as he declared that Lee was a true great fighter and a great general. He also said Lincoln once had a phobia of the Southern leader whom support of slavery had made his legacy a heavy, contested, and divisive issue. Well, that is enough to condemn Lee right there. The comments came after anecdotes about Ohio-born Ulysses S. Grant, alleged drinking problem, which historians deem exaggerated. Robert E. Lee was winning battle after battle. Well, he did in the beginning. Lincoln came home. He said, "I can't beat Robert E. Lee." Trump said, and then he said to Lincoln, "You can't use Grant anymore. He's an alcoholic." And Lincoln said, "I don't care if he's an alcoholic. Frankly, give me 6 or 7 more like him, and we'll start to win." And they did start to win the war. Minutes earlier, he had hailed African American unemployment as 1% and asked African American voters to honor us by voting. Why would African American voters vote for a party that has dishonored them just because a lunatic was loose in the White House? Getting away from the Democrats, he told them, think of it. We have the best numbers in history. That's a lie. I think we're going to get the African American vote. It's true. And back to also celebrated West's visit to the Oval Office. That was on Thursday. Adding what he did was pretty amazing. No doubt about that. The man was psychotic. His speech threatened to reignite a highly divisive debate over America's racial history, with just weeks to go until the midterm election. Trump had previously defended statues commemorating Confederate leaders like Lee, tweeting last year, "Sad to see history and culture of our great country being ripped apart with the removal of beautiful statues and monuments. Critics say such statues glorify historic advocacy of slavery and obviously racism." Grant was not only the Ohio native whom Trump deployed as a foil in his intervention on a series of sensitive cultural issues. He also referred to Neil Armstrong, telling the group that he planted the flag on the face of the moon. He did. There was no kneeling. How did he know that? There was nothing, there was no game boom in reference to the NFL athletes leading in protest. These are all issues to ignite the base. He was in Lebanon to boost the campaign of Steve Chabot, the incumbent whose first district encompasses the county and who has distanced himself from the president ahead of the event. We didn't ask him to come. He wasn't my first choice or my second choice or my third choice, he told a newspaper, fearful that Trump's rhetoric could provide costly in a competitive race. Over the night, however, Chabot appeared content to revere in the president's support. I never thought I'd say this, but bless Wes, he said. Well, I won't use the deity there. I won't disrespect the so-called Christians. Anyway, standing before a supersized American flag, suspended between two daggers, the president listed his achievements, with redoubling his attack on traditional opponents in a rally that exceeded an hour in length. He described the Democrats as party of the mob, and he was speaking to a mob. And said the media, he said of the media, we've learned to live with them. We don't like them, but we have learned. Well, no doubt they're bringing out his propaganda. Supporters gleefully chanted Trump, 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 Kavanaugh, Kavanaugh. During the event, which while booing in reference to the media and Democratic politicians whom Trump accused of trying to stymie the nomination of Kavanaugh. At the outset of his speech, Trump celebrated the release of some American pastor, Brunson, from house arrest in Turkey. He was on house arrest. The impression we got from the press that he was actually in jail. He went through a lot, but he's on his way home. Well, that's good. He should be home. He's really proud. Anyway, forget that. Early, he told reporters in Cincinnati that there has been no deal to secure the pastor's release. He lied. The president has been less vocal on the suspected murder of a U.S. resident and Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi, although he said he'd raise the issue with Saudi counterpart. That's just crazy. I didn't know he was a U.S. resident, Mr. Khashoggi. Anyway, he also praised Mike DeWine. Mike DeWine's been around a long time, to replace term-bound critic John Kirsch. He's the governor of Ohio at the present time. Richard Corey, who was at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. He was hurting people. I think he enjoyed it, said Trump of Corey's time in office. No, really, I think he enjoyed it. Well, he enjoyed protecting the people, consumer rights of people of the United States, no doubt. The rally took place in Warren County, a GOP fortress, where Trump more than doubled Hillary Clinton's tally in 2016. But had not voted for Democratic presidential candidate in over a half century, over 50 years. And this Cincinnati kid, that's just ridiculous here. He credits for sporting investment opportunities in the city. Cincinnati kid was also a criminal. Anyway, this complements Uncle Carl's little article here on actually what DJ Trump was up to, praising a terrorist named Robert E. Lee, a born racist, and no doubt this commercial will play out, period. Let's go on here to North Dakota, and Native American voting rights activists fight back against voter ID restrictions. Native American voting activists in North Dakota have launched an audacious plan aimed at pushing back against the Supreme Court ruling that threatens the re-election of Heidi Heitkamp. We talked about that. The decision was a 6-2 Tuesday to leave in place law that required residents provide an ID displaying a residential address rather than a P.O. box. Republicans lawmakers have pushed for the measure, said the rule is designed to combat voter fraud, which is a lie. Tribal officials and said it appears aimed at making it harder for thousands of Native Americans to vote, particularly those who live on the reservation without a conventional street addresses. The law specifically bans the use of post office boxes as an attorney form of address, rendering many tribal ID cards invalid. Native American activists have responded with a plan to create addresses on the spot for those who need them. Tribal officials will go to North Dakota in the second year, access to rural addressing software, and a shared database of voters' names. North Dakota is the only state that does not require voters to register. So how in the hell are you going to require people to show ID when there is no voter registration in the state? O.J. Siemens, chief executive of Four Directions and Native American Voting Rights Group, said the strategy was legal, watertight, and necessary to counter devastating court ruling. But if it even doesn't change the overall result, it is our fight back, Siemens said. In one of the country's least populated states, where Heidi Heitkamp, one of the Senate's most endangered Democrats, eked out a victory by 3,000 votes in 2012, the Native Americans could put her over the top. The same thing they've done for Senator McCoskey out in Alaska. Kramer leads by double digits, that's according to the poll. Native rights voting groups described this week's Supreme Court ruling, in which Kavanaugh didn't even participate, as a setback. It's a partisan, intentional effort at targeting Native voters. That is from Matt Campbell, an attorney at the Native Americans Rights Fund, who represents a group of military veterans as claimants in the case. He cites official figures indicating that in 2012 there were just 9 cases of potential voter fraud out of 325,000 plus votes. Voter fraud is not a problem. Al Jaggers, the Secretary of State, did not respond. And the Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg warned that the North Dakota ID law presents a severe risk on a grand scale of voter confusion. Her opinion noted that different ID rules were in place during the state primary this spring, meaning voters might show up at the polls with the ID that falls short or simply stay at home. Reasonable voters may well assume that the ID allowing them to vote in the primary election would remain valid in the general election. She's correct about that. The flashpoint in the legal battle over voter ID came in 2013 in the wake of the Heitkamp election, when the state legislature argued that the system in place at the time facilitated voter fraud. Legislators banned attorney for those without IDs, including affidavits signed under penalty of perjury. They then removed college and military cards from a list of accepted documents, passed another law requiring a person's ID contain a current address. Now, even military IDs will not work there, and college IDs. This is obviously aimed at the military IDs, was just icing on the cake. Deputy State Secretary of State, proponent of the effort to tighten the voter rules, said at the time the measure was drafted after concerned citizens, that's a lie, and raised their fear about possible voter fraud. Activists said a succession of laws put in place in 2012 had disenfranchised thousands of tribal members, especially those who live on reservation in wilderness areas. During the 2014 midterm in Rowlett County, home to the Turtle Mountain Tribe Reservation, turnout plunged from 45% to 33%. We've been dealing with suppression of our voting rights and votes for decades, Winpan Little Elk, who led the Obama Native American Outreach campaign, said. Let's go to Bismarck and the Bismarck Tribune in Bismarck, North Dakota. This is by Amy Darpley. Anyway, Native American voting rights groups aim to remove hurdles in North Dakota. A group dedicated to advancing equality at the ballot box says it plans to make certain that all Native Americans in North Dakota can vote in November in spite of voter ID requirements, as many see as a hurdle. For directions, again, Native American Voting Rights Group said it is reaching out to North Dakota tribal governments to assist them in having tribal officials at every voting place on their reservations who can help eligible voters if they lack the required documents. North Dakota requires voters to provide an ID with a street address, which aren't always assigned on reservations. Many tribal members have post office boxes as their residential addresses. Supreme Court recently rejected the claim, we went over that. The Standing Rock Sioux Tribe has said in a statement this week the law will prevent thousands of Native Americans in North Dakota from voting. Mike Faith, who is the chairman, said there is no good reason that a post office address is not sufficient to vote. It's getting harder and harder for Native Americans to vote. The law clearly discriminates against Native Americans in North Dakota, Faith said in a statement. Our voices should be heard, and they should be heard fairly at the polls, just like all other Americans. Britt Heatley, a consultant for Four Directions, which is led by members of the South Dakota Rosebud Sioux Tribe, said the organization believes it's a common sense solution. The group is working with tribal leaders in North Dakota to have tribal officials available at every polling place on the reservation to issue tribal voting letters that include eligible voters' name, address, birth date, and residential address. Jim I suppose that is Sekran, Deputy Secretary, said during a meeting with tribal leaders that the letters from tribal officials that the information would be considered a valid ID. Centrum, who asked to speak during the meeting with the tribal committee, which included leaders from all 5 Dakota tribal nations, said his office had been working to inform tribal leaders about how they can vote. If information on ID is not current, it can be supplemented with other documents such as a current utility bill. More information is available at the site. Voters who have the right documents on election day can cast their ballot. Cast a ballot that is set aside, and the voter has about a week to provide documentation. That is according to Setram. North Dakota's House Leader, what's his name? Al Carson, a Republican from Fargo, attended the meeting, emphasized the goal of voter identification requirements to protect the integrity of the ballot box. It's important that our intent was not to disenfranchise. He lied. Anyway, we posted this on our Facebook page. Let me just check on our time here. Okay, we're rolling along here. And sometimes the old cutting edge here is I think we'll go to Facing South here as we conclude. This is from Facing South. Chris Corm, I suppose. Many polls and pundits agree a blue wave of Democratic gains are coming in 2018. With the divisive nomination of Kavanaugh, fired up Republican voters, Democrats are still expected to capitalize on anti-Trump feelings, no doubt about that. But the 2018 Democratic wave could do more than determine control of Congress. If current trends hold, they could deeply shake up Southern politics, weakening GOP rule in the region for years to come. Over the past 50 years, as parties and voters realign in the South in wake of the Civil Rights Movement, the so-called Democratic Solid South gave way to Republican domination. In 2016, Republican political grip on the South reached new heights. The region delivered 160 of DJ Trump's 306 electoral votes. And after the dust settled, the GOP controlled every legislative chamber in the South, and all but two of the region's governor mansions. But two high-profile elections last year signaled a blue wave was coming in historic gains in Virginia, including winning the race, governor's race and lieutenant governor's race. Nearly seizing control of the House of Delegates were followed by the election in Alabama of Doug Jones, the first Democrat in 25 years. A new round of Democratic victories in 2018 could build on the momentum and give progressives an opportunity to capitalize on demographic changes and gain a political foothold to move on. In the Senate, which is 51-49, several of the 32 U.S. senators elected this year are in the South. The two-state contests aren't considered competitive, as Mississippi's two senators are expected to go Republican. Virginia's one Democratic, leaving four competitive races. Now, these are the races in Florida. With Cook Report, it's a toss-up with a crystal ball, a toss-up with the Nate Silver franchise leads Democrat with inside election. Not familiar with them as a toss-up. Roll call, the average is a toss-up. This is in Florida, Bill Nelson, and who is running against him? Scott, the current governor. In Tennessee, Republican. A toss-up from the Cook Report leans Republican from the crystal ball, likely Republican from Nate Silver's shop, and the others are lean Republican. In the state of Texas, this is the contest between Lion Ted Cruz and Beto O'Rourke. It's a toss-up with Cook, leans Republican with the crystal ball, leans Republican with Nate Silver, likely Republican with inside elections, and the roll call and leans Republican is the average. In the state of West Virginia, Cook leans Democrat with a crystal ball, likely Democrat Nate Silver's shop, tilts Democrat, the others, so evidently Senator Meacham is in pretty good shape. One or two toss-up in 2018, Nelson, who started his political career as a legislator back in 1972, and the current governor, Scott. As of late August, candidates had raised more than $50 million. Incidentally, in Texas, Beto O'Rourke in 3 months raised almost $40 billion. Tennessee is not getting much attention there. That's why old Bob Corker is retiring. Trump enthusiasts known for such antics, which is the perfect campaign bill, and being censored by Twitter for running an inflammatory, falsely accusing Planned Parenthood, etc. Faces a moderate. Now, this is full of Phil Brazen. Phil Brazen's been endorsed by the entertainer. What is her name? I'll get to it later. Now, he ran for governor in 2002 and 2006. Won an election twice in there. Beto O'Rourke, we don't have to say much about. Out of El Paso, former punk rock band member, and his situation ridiculing DJ Trump won Texas by 10 points. Actually, I believe it was more like 9 points there, period. In West Virginia, a yes vote to confirm Kavanaugh. Well, that's Beto O'Rourke and Willie Nelson basically throw the bastards out. The key to Democrats' chances will be 29 closely watched races in 9 southern states, with 28 of them currently being held by Republicans. 8 of the battleground races are in Florida, where turnout will be boosted by high-profile governor's races. In 9 are in Georgia and in Texas. In perennial battleground state North Carolina, Democrats have put 3 to 4 seats in play. Indeed, as the 538 notes, the biggest factor limiting the blue wave's power in southern congressional districts will be, of course, Republican gerrymandering. Now, gerrymandering is one of the issues, is very, very prominent in the South, along with voter suppression as far as North Dakota. And we'll do a special show here at WBRN Radio and the Boston Red Network just on voter suppression. We have a few shows to do. This week in Editorial Note, we'll be doing the one and only debate between Gavin Newsom, this is the California governor's race, and Cox, a perennial candidate from Illinois that is going south in a hurry in the state of California. We incidentally did debates in Indiana between Senator Donnelly and Brim, the Republican candidate there, Mike Brim. And we also did the gubernatorial debate in the state of Minnesota. So we've been covering quite a few of these debates, and we'll cover more of these debates. We also covered a debate between Beto O'Rourke and lying Ted Cruz. 7 states in the South have races for governor this year: Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina, Tennessee, and Texas, which rates states governing magazine. They're safe in Arkansas, Alabama, and Texas. South Carolina is mostly viewed as safe Republican, although both governing and the Cook reports give it a likely Republican rating. Polls are wrong about Andrew Gillum, no doubt about that, an African American there running. But Gillum's hopes the polls are right because they show him a razor-thin edge. Well, meantime, the razor-thin edge is not enough. Now, Stacey Abrams made the cover of Time this week in Florida. Her Kemp, Brian Kemp, has purged the 700,000 voters from the rolls, held up processing of 53,000 registration forms, which appropriately affect African American voters. And we won't have time for the state legislatures, but again, this is a very good article here. And we'll go now to ESPN. There was a first playoff game last night was held in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The LA Dodgers were there. It was a 5-6 win for the Brewers. At one time, the score was 5-1. LA had the 1. The Brewers had the 5. It was 5-1, and became a very tight game. LA almost pulled it out, and we'll just hear a little bit of this. The ups and downs of the bullpen displayed as the Brewers take game
just
1.
Like you scripted it, right, Josh?
I don't know about that now, but definitely got the win. That's the huge part. That was the way the script should end, you know.
What was it like as you saw the Dodgers chip away late in the game? There's nothing you could do at that point. You've already gone 3.
Yeah, you know, just see what happens. You know, I have faith in our guys. You know, our guys can pitch the ball well and hit it as well. So definitely have faith that we're going to finish this one out.
Now, you've only gone 3 innings once this season, which was back in July. Obviously, you're...
This is a relief pitcher that the Brewers put into the game, period there. There were 43,000 plus fans at Miller Park in Milwaukee. A 5-6 save situation. Mr. Clayton Kershaw was a starter. He left the game in the early innings and went into a bit of a tailspin after that. He didn't get any help, obviously, from the Dodgers. That's when they had the 5-1 deficit. But both starting pitchers didn't last very long. Around the third inning or so, they disappeared. Gil Gomez, he disappeared, and just a host of relievers after that appeared in the game. But the game came very close in the 9th inning there, and almost was the end of the Brewers when they were literally in the National League Championship Series. That will be Clayton Kershaw there. Well, anyway, that will be signal the end, basically, there. Now, Game 2 later today will be an interesting game, and we'll see what happens there. I believe, let's see, who is the Game 2 starter? That was Harder they were interviewing that you heard earlier here. And let me see if I'll give you the line score very quickly here. The LA Dodgers had 5 runs, 8 hits, and 4 errors. You don't usually win a game getting that many errors, period. The Brewers had 6 runs, 11 hits, and no errors there. And let me just go to the DA's game. And Mr. Ryu will be the starter, I think, for the LA Dodgers. And Wade Miley will start for the Milwaukee Brewers. And the other game, the night game, will be the Astros in Fenway Park. Justin Vanderlander will start for the Astros, and Chris Sale for the Red Sox. There should be some good games. That'll start at 4 p.m. Eastern with the Dodgers. And let me see if I can see the line. Should be 34 degrees in Milwaukee, according to AccuWeather, and 49 in Boston, not bad at all. And I don't see the Vegas lines. We'll have to do a program on both the National League Championship Series and the American League Championship Series, and we'll have to do it as quick as maybe, as one said. Anyway, this will do it for us. Have a good weekend, everyone. We'll return with the Monday Morning Quarterback on a Monday morning with the talk shows, or events that imitate the talk shows on Sunday, and the latest on the championship series of both the National and American Leagues, and whatever information. Hopefully we'll have a program up on All About Sports. That's our sports presentation. I think we only have one program up so far that tilts more towards economic sports. Incidentally, speaking of economics, Numbers Man, that is our economics program. From the macro standpoint, plenty to talk about there. The market and the 1,300 or more points lost on the market. Where's the market going? Stock market, where's the bond market going? Where are interest rates going? Have a lot to talk about there.